The Hamas fighters who crossed the border came on motorcycles and pickup trucks carrying AK-47s and light rocket-propelled grenades. An AK-47 fires small lead bullets. It cannot vaporize a row of sedans. It cannot melt engine blocks. It does not possess the capability to turn an entire highway into a graveyard of melted steel. You know what can do that, though? Hellfire missiles, autocannons, the type of heavy weapons deployed by Israeli Apache helicopters. For nearly 3 years, you have been given a highly sanitized, strictly policed narrative about what occurred in Israel on October 7th. We've been told a very specific story, right? Anyone who stepped outside of that story, anyone who asked logical questions about how one of the most advanced militaries on earth stood down for 7 hours while its own citizens were attacked and killed was immediately branded, you know the words, conspiracy theorist, anti-Semitic. But what happens when the official narrative begins to splinter under the weight of actual evidence? See, tonight, new documentary footage has emerged out of Israel. This isn't speculation from the dark corners of the internet. This is raw footage of a high-ranking Israeli official caught on camera in the chaos of October 7th, speaking in Hebrew, explicitly coordinating what can only be described as something called the Hannibal Directive. Watch this.
הייתי עכשיו מפציץ את כל קו הרצועה עם ארטילריה, דופק להם מכה על מנת שיהיה להם בעיה.
ממש שלם על זה. כתבתי את זה לאמי.
הם לא מעלים מזכרים, את רוצה שנראה?
לא, על עזה. שורק את הכל. עם החיילים שחטפו להם.
אלו הרגעים הראשונים בחמ"ל המשטרה.
איפה? באיזה יישוב?
עוד לפני שהשר הממונה יגיע. בטרם יוחלט מה לשידור ומה לצנזור.
רגע, אתה מצלם שם? אני נותן לך אישור, אתה צלם את זה. תוציא את זה בבקשה.
Okay, if you read that bottom line there, he said, please take this out. Think about that for a moment. Why would a government minister in the middle of a national crisis panic over a camera capturing tactical discussions only to be viewed later? What were they trying to hide? Well, I'm glad you asked. They wanted to hide that the command was just uttering on tape, quote, break it all apart, along with the soldiers who were abducted. What does that mean? That is something called the Hannibal Directive. 2 years ago, I was one of the very first reporters in the U.S. to actually report on this whole situation and exposed at the time the fact that Israel had clearly used the Hannibal Directive. Here is some of that report. When the IDF began to finally use their firepower and military to engage Hamas in southern Israel, did they exclusively target enemy militants? Well, evidence actually points to no. To understand what the Israeli military did to their own civilians on October 7th, you have to understand the political aspirations of Hamas and what the goal of taking hostages is. Political leverage. There are over 10,000 Palestinians in Israeli jails, 3,000 of whom have not been to trial or charged with a crime. When militant groups manage to capture Israeli civilians or soldiers, it gives them leverage to force a prisoner swap and to get some of their people out of Israeli prison. For example, in 1986, Hamas managed to kidnap 3 Israeli soldiers and bring them into Gaza. They demanded 1,150 Palestinian prisoners in return for those 3 soldiers. Well, after this, the military drafted a secret field order to prevent future kidnappings. It was called the Hannibal Directive. The directive gets its name from the Carthaginian general who chose to poison himself rather than allow himself to be captured alive by the Romans. Back in 2003, again, strangely enough, October 7th, 2003, 3 Israeli soldiers were taken hostage and brought into Lebanon. Following the activation of the Hannibal Directive, IDF attack helicopters fired indiscriminately on 26 vehicles, thus ensuring the death of their own soldiers and therefore robbing Lebanese militants of the ability to demand Israel make concessions. Again, that report was from 2 years ago. So now you know. The Hannibal Directive dictates that if an Israeli soldier or citizen is on the verge of being captured or taken hostage, or if they are captured by enemy forces, the military's priority is to neutralize the kidnapping at all costs, even if it means killing any and all Israeli hostages alongside their captors. It's meant to prevent enemy factions from gaining leverage in future prisoner exchange negotiations. On October 7th, we not only saw the Hannibal Directive in action, We saw something that a former Israeli official called at the time a mass Hannibal event. Now, the Israeli government claims that they officially canceled this directive in 2016 because they deemed it was too brutal, too unethical. But all the evidence pointing to October 7th tells a completely different story. Look at the evidence. For months, mainstream media broadcasted horrifying images of this highway you're looking at right now, leading away from the Nova Music Festival, where the attacks first started. We saw rows upon rows upon rows of cars, not just burned, but completely incinerated. In fact, many of those cars were melted. The media line was instantaneous. Hamas did this. Hamas torched these cars. This was a major part of the claim as to why extreme brutality was justified in Gaza. But let's apply some basic logic here, shall we? The Hamas fighters who crossed the border came on motorcycles and pickup trucks carrying AK-47s and light rocket-propelled grenades. An AK-47 fires small lead bullets. It cannot vaporize a row of sedans. It cannot melt engine blocks. It does not possess the capability to turn an entire highway into a graveyard of melted steel. You know what can do that, though? Hellfire missiles, autocannons, the type of heavy weapons deployed by Israeli Apache helicopters. Again, I explained this in great detail 2 years ago, and the response was, that can't be true. Israel would not do this to its own people. And yet this new documentary footage confirms that the orders were caught on video, and it matched exactly what we saw on the ground. The military was explicitly told to break it all apart along with the soldiers who were abducted. Let's also not forget the instances inside the multiple kibbutz communities where Israeli tanks shelled civilian homes full of hostages, killing Israelis inside to eliminate the Hamas fighters who were holding them. And again, why did it take the Israeli military 7 hours to launch a coordinated defense, but Apache helicopters were instantly greenlit to shell fleeing vehicles headed towards Gaza? For months, only a select few truth seekers were willing to ask these questions. People who refused to accept the corporate media script. People like Charlie Kirk.
But I think some questions need to be asked. Was there a stand down order? Was there a stand down order? 6 hours? I don't believe it. Israel's the size of New Jersey. When I took a helicopter ride from Jerusalem to the Gaza border, it's 45 minutes. Wow. 6 hours. Did somebody in the government say stand down? That is a legitimate, non-conspiracy question. The whole country is...
It is a non-conspiracy question. It's a straightforward question. Was there a stand-down order? It's a question any competent journalist should have asked. We asked it. But Charlie faced immense, vicious pushback from the establishment for daring to voice it. In fact, if you go online right now, there's an entire undercurrent of speculation suggesting that Charlie Kirk's assassination wasn't just a random act of political violence and it had nothing to do with transgenderism. Some are openly questioning if he was targeted for asking those very questions. Now, obviously, there's no evidence he was killed over those questions, at least not yet. But what is confirmed, what is documented beyond a shadow of a doubt, is that multiple pieces of evidence are coming directly from the mouths of Israeli officials themselves. Listen to former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant when he was cornered on this exact topic just over a year ago.
ישירות, אני חושב שבאופן טקטי במקומות שונים ניתנה, במקומות אחרים לא ניתנה, וזו בעיה.
Yeah, in some places it was, he said. He admits it. He admits the use of the Hannibal Directive on October 7th. Yet, when independent journalists pointed towards those words a year ago, they were ignored and discredited. Today, the Israeli government still officially denies it. They claim they do not recognize that directive. But the footage doesn't lie, and the images don't lie. The question is no longer whether or not the Hannibal Directive was deployed on October 7th. The evidence proves it was. The real question now is, what will the world do with this truth? Because think about it. Every single piece of explosive evidence we just showed you, every bit of it, the documentary footage, the insider testimonies, the internal reports, the politicians, it is all in Hebrew. Virtually none of it's being broadcast in English, the language we're speaking right now. And that is entirely by design. See, none of these secrets were meant for American eyes or for American ears. So how did we find out about it? Because on this show, we never stop asking the questions that most mainstream journalists avoid. We refuse to consume that spoon-fed information handed to us, and when the situation demands it, we get our hands dirty. We'll go directly to the source and we translate what is actually being said on the ground. Because when you do, you discover the staggering scope of what we have been systematically blindfolded from. The missing signs, the catastrophic, inexplicable failures, and all the lies that have been told to you and to me for 3 long years.